Hello and welcome back to KXP. And today we are going to put an emphasis on that exploration because we are going to take a giant leap forward in our program by attempting to land a probe on the surface of the Mun. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to focus the whole episode on that goal. So let's load in. And the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our missions. We've got a couple plane missions here. We're going to work on those later. We also have a test mission. We got to test a certain type of rocket engine. And so we're going to use those as our lifting vehicle. We don't have any science to spend, but we also can go over here to the administration building and work on a program. We wanted to do the Mun probes, but however, we had orbited the Mun already, so we kind of locked ourselves out of that program, which is a little annoying, but we wanted to set up a communication satellite off screen, so that's what we ended up doing, and because of the fact that we orbited the Mun in order to do so, kind of lost out on that. I didn't pay attention to that, but you live and you learn. So the one that I'm probably going to end up going with is Probe Frenzy, because it will increase the science from your probe transmissions. It also increased the cost of a crewed vessel. So if I want to launch a Kerbal, it's going to be way more expensive than to launch a probe. So we're going to focus on probes first, especially since this is the unkerbled start. So the whole point is to focus on probes first. So here we are, just creating a little thing with our little CubeSat. We're going to put some science experiments in this deploy bay. At first I was going to go for the two-way symmetry, but then I decided to go for 3. And these will aim to get space high and low above the Mun, and then hopefully one on the surface when we land. So we get our thermometers, our barometers, our mystery goo, and our onboard cameras. For those who don't know, if you go into the command and control center, I believe it's stock, the onboard camera. That's another science experiment that's not listed in the science tab, so don't forget to check that. So we're just separating all the experiments from their symmetry to make them each their own unique thing, so that way when we set them up on an action group, we can have 3 different action groups for the 3 biomes, the high space, the low space, and whichever biome we land on. And sadly, for some reason, one of the mods, I think on Kerbal Start, gets rid of the telemetry experiment, so nothing to be done with the probe core. Okay, so now that I got all those put onto their action groups, I'm going to put the last battery in and put in the magnetometer boom. I waited until after setting up the action groups because obviously it covers them, so it would be hard to select. Normally I only do the 2, and it's very clean coming straight out through the doors, but this one has the 3-way symmetry, so it's a little awkward, but it'll do. We're also going to have 3-way symmetry on our communication dishes. Because we're using remote tech, these need to actually be aimed at a particular place. And so we're going to have one aimed at whatever active vessel, one aimed at the one aimed at Kerbin, and one aimed at the Mun. And we're keeping the active vessel on there because in case we end up wanting to make this kind of like a relay, that gives us that ability too. Technically, we only need the 2 for the Kerbin and the Mun. 3-way symmetry for the solar panels as well, and I put it a Communitron 16 on there. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of building the rest of the rocket, so apologies for that. But here we have my several attempts, and every time you see a cut, it's because I went through another test flight and learned a little bit more. But here is our probe. We're going to put some RCS on it because in one of our test flights we found out that it has absolutely 0 control once it leaves the stage behind. So this is generally going to be it. We've put these tiny little SRBs, the fleas, I believe they are, and we're putting some explosives on the stages because we want to make sure we don't leave any space debris. We don't have access to separatrons, so that's why we're using these little SRBs. Not incredibly efficient, but very Kerbal. So here we are with the rocket basically in store. The reason why it's built so big is because those engines that we're starting to test, the Sphinx, have a very low thrust to weight ratio. Through all my tests, I needed to have that extra power just to get up. But before we do anything else, I want to kind of show you what we did off camera. And that is we set up our remote tech satellite system. It's not perfect, but it's a square. All the satellites are orbiting at the same apoapsis and periapsis. However, they're all kind of on their own thing and will drift. But for now, it'll get me everything that I need, all the signal that I'm gonna require. And then on the Mun, like I said, we orbited. We put these two satellites in to kind of just give ourselves some basic coverage. It's not going to be perfect. There might be times when we lose signal, but you know, that's why we need to plan and prepare, and that's what flight computer's for. So we decided to launch at about I guess this would be late sunset, and it's not always great launching at night because you can't really see your rocket as much. However, this in all of our test flights, we found that this was the ideal angle for us. For that, when we arrived, we would be arriving in such a way that we would hopefully maintain communications for most of the flight. We get this nice little orange glow, and once we pass the cloud layer, so clean separation there. Once we pass the cloud layers, we'll be able to see a little bit better. And if you look at the nav ball, I'm pitching over, but just ever so slightly. And we're going to be taking a less efficient gravity turn. We're going to be basically keeping at that angle that we're kind of hovering at. We're not going to follow the prograde. We're just going to hold this because those engines, like I mentioned before, have a very low thrust to weight ratio. And if we start pitching over, anywhere before we actually end up pitching over, it will not have enough power, will not gain enough altitude, and we will not break and make it to space. So this flight was a bit particular. Those Sphinx engines are not I mean, they're big. They're bigger than all the other ones that we have, but for some reason they are just not as good. Like, I would prefer some swivels over these ones, but they have a nice plume. I will say that. Also, I guess that would be sunrise, not sunset. Early in the morning. So yeah, even though our prograde is starting to pitch over, we're going to try to keep this mostly upright trajectory. I went ahead and enlarged the delta V stats and the orbit information, so if you want to just keep an eye on, you know, what our burn time is left and apoapsis and whatnot to kind of track our flight, because you can see our apoapsis is only 3,000 meters in front of where we're at now. So if we lose any kind of momentum, or if we don't point ourselves the right way, we're not going to make it. It was a very tricky flight. Unkerballed start has definitely made the early game much more challenging, I would say, because for some reason the way that they organized the tech tree makes things that were relatively easy around the same time, like the same point in the game, is harder, even though you have similar. Well, I guess you don't have similar technology, but you have similar pieces. One thing I never mentioned about it that's been kind of good is it also it changes your part count in the beginning from, what is it, like 30 parts to 40 parts, I believe, and that's to accommodate for all the extra probe pieces. It's very nice. It helps out. The extra 10 parts really makes a difference. So our apoapsis is just about to break into space. We got a lot more momentum in those past few minutes. So now that I know that I'm going to be in space, I can start pointing down and getting a little more efficient with this. But until I could guarantee that I would make it into the vacuum, I couldn't risk pitching any far forward. But hopefully with upgraded engines, we won't have to do that as much. We can take a proper turn. But yeah, I didn't get a chance to point it out, but the very moment that we dropped our last SRBs, we had a thrust to weight ratio of 1.0, and we hovered there for a quick second, and then it turned to 1.1, and we were able to keep going. So that's where this rocket is. It's just barely hovering the line. Okay, so now we're going to bring up Flight Computer, which is an aspect of remote tech that allows you to automatically program in your maneuvers and several other things, but we're going to primarily use it for our maneuvers. It's pointing at the prograde, and then we're going to have to manually time warp, but it will automatically handle the burn. We're going to blow off our fairing and extend our solar panels and communication dishes and antenna. It also opens the service bay doors, because even though the magnetometer boom will clip out of it, and it really doesn't matter that it does, I like to have it open. Just the idea that and all the other experiments that they're actually exposed to the element. Look at that plume. I think that's from Waterfall. Great mod. In this, I kept forgetting in every single one of my test flights, and apparently in the real flight as well, I kept forgetting to turn the gimbal off on these engines, because once they get into the vacuum space, they really like to wobble around. And it's not wobbling a lot right now, but that's because I'm getting to it soon. But if I were to have let that go, it would really start freaking out. So we're going to turn off all our gimbal except for our center engine. We're going to lower that gimbal, and then I put the SRBs to get them away from our craft, but I also forgot that I put explosives on them. I didn't need explosives on them because we're not even in orbit yet, so they would have just come back down no problem. But explosives are cheap. So we're just cruising along until our periapsis breaks out of the negatives, and soon it picks up, our camera changes, and we find ourselves in orbit. So Flight Computer automatically throttles down and kills the burn at the appropriate time. We are circularized pretty much as good as we need to be. We still have a little bit of fuel left, so we're going to utilize that to get ourselves to the Mun. So let's go ahead and plot out this maneuver. I'm going to actually leave the majority of this mission unedited because we don't really waste a lot of time in this. I just kind of keep moving forward through each of the progress, or each of the points, and just, focusing on making progress and trying to get it all done. So we're going to just kind of watch the whole thing. This is, once again, it's not the first time we've been to the Mun. If you look at my channel, we've been to the Mun many times before with probes and Kerbals. But with every new series, it's always exciting for your firsts. And this is the first time that these particular Kerbals at this particular agency has set foot on the Mun. So I can't just, blow through it all blasé like, oh yeah, here's our translunar injection. Who cares about it? Yeah. I want to care about it a little bit, at least in the beginning, and then with each new body, with each new milestone, we'll focus on different parts and different new achievements and milestones. So I got myself a maneuver. It's not a great one. The inclination that we're at is less than ideal, but it doesn't matter too much because we're gonna plan to do a mid-course correction anyway. So I'm not too bothered by that. I just want to get a capture, get it so it's roughly a low enough periapsis that I don't have to do too much adjustments later. And if you notice that little bit of fuel that we had is going to take us the majority of the way there, like, because the delta V from that wasn't actually all that much. I think it's somewhere normally. I think it's normally supposed to be like 860 for the delta V. Could be wrong. Yeah. Oh, I right on the money. 860 is what the delta V map suggests as to do for the Trans-Mun injection. So coming in at 820.6, pretty good. So we're just gonna time warp our way around the planet. And the lights go out as we reach the dark side. I'm noticing that my skybox is nearly non-existent. You can see parts of it, like over in the bottom right. You can see there's like supposed to be the Milky Way, but it's not very milky. That is not the way. But if you look in the top left, you'll see that underneath our timestamp there is red letters that say no connection, and that's because well, we have no connection. If we wanted to do anything with this probe, if we wanted to open the solar panels, if we wanted to adjust its trajectory, if we wanted to turn it on or off, put it on hibernate, or bring it out of hibernate, we couldn't. Because the way that remote tech works is you need actual signal. It's I don't know if I've ever really like broken down what remote tech is, but it was one of the first mods that I ever installed on Kerbal because I watched someone's playthrough and they used it, and I thought it was so cool, and I played with it for more than I played without it. So, but then we stopped playing with it once we started up RP1, because RP1 has a real antenna, which is, you know, comparable to remote tech, and so we just opted for that. And we figured, like, hey, if we're gonna do this extra realism in RP1, then we don't need to force ourselves to do extra realism in our other series, and so we dropped it for a while. And it's definitely been fun coming back to it. It's hard though, you know. Once we stopped, I kind of realized how much work I used to have to put into communication networks, and then I didn't. Suddenly I didn't. Here we are. I didn't realize that. I thought we had lost connection. That's why our engine had stopped. I didn't realize that the stage had flown through, and so it took me a second to realize, which meant that our staging was later than anticipated. So our burn isn't going to be exactly what we planned, but still should be all right. And we're just going to watch our apoapsis approach and make its intercept. And remote tech throttles down and takes care of the canceling of it. But as you see, it's not the exact angle that we had before, but it's not too far off, so that's pretty nice. So let's go ahead and, not exactly halfway, a little bit closer to Kerbin than a midway point, but that's because I want to make sure that I have enough signal to actually function this. Okay, so there we go. We got our purple line is now pretty much equatorial. It's about 40 kilometers, and we're going to try to bring that down to somewhere in the 30 range. I like to get nice and low above the Mun surface, so that way I can get that low in space science. So there we are. We plotted our maneuver. Let's go ahead and plot it into flight computer. And we're just going to let it drift on over, get into position. There we go. Look at that planet. Absolutely gorgeous. This game is so peaceful. Just being able to see it so clearly now has just made it ever so more gratifying. Satisfying. Satisfying was the word I meant to say, not gratifying. Successfully completing your goals. Now that's gratifying. Look at that marble. I can't wait till we reach these levels in RP1, being able to see the Earth from a vantage point like this. It's gonna be good. I'm excited. Yeah, my skybox is definitely... I don't know that it's missing. I think it's still there. I just think it's barely visible. I'll try to fix that by the next episode. So our engine fires, and it takes very little delta V to adjust our trajectory. So there we are. We're at 35 kilometers above the surface. And now normally I plot in my capture burn here. I just do it right now and then I put it into the computer. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I was thinking of maybe I was worried that it wouldn't calculate correctly and I was thinking of KXP2 or something, but yeah, no, didn't plot in the maneuver. Just let my satellite go to the Mun and potentially lose signal before it could capture. So very clever thinking on my part. But you know, that's how it goes sometimes. You know, sometimes you make quick decisions and you're like, oh, it'll work out. And sometimes it does. You know, this one might work out. I'm gonna go ahead and time warp. We have our focus on the Mun, but we're also keeping an eye on our probe right there. We're gonna time warp to the sphere of influence. Another great change of my new computer system is that it doesn't take 5 minutes to enter the sphere of influence. I used to have to cut out a huge chunk of just still footage as my computer worked on figuring out what the new sphere of influence was like. So it's nice. I've been really enjoying being able to play this game a little bit better. Okay, so we are now lined up for our maneuver, and we are high in space, so we can actually do some science here. So let's go ahead and bring up our science marker, our science confidence and money marker. We're going to go ahead and hit the action group that did all of one set. And as you see there, we are getting extra science from our transmissions due to Probe Frenzy, the program that we activated in the administration building. Alright, so we did everything we need, so now it's just a matter of time warping to the maneuver and trying to orbit. And it gets really dark, but distant object enhancement gives us a nice little view of Moho and Eve and somewhere else at one point. Those little stars peeking in. I think that's Jewel right there, the green one. And before we know it, we're around to the other side of the Mun so we can begin to see again. And our tiny little engine does its tiny little burn, but it's fairly efficient. With that little wobbling of the camera, we now know that we are in orbit. But of course, we're going to bring it down to a nice, sensible circular orbit, because that's I find that to be easiest to land. It's nice that our solar panels are getting full exposure. And because we're on the light side of the Mun, I think we're actually also on the side that focuses... Oh, that was Dress over there. But we're on the side that faces Kerbin, so we'll have a lot more signal. We're a lot less likely to lose signal. That's what I meant to say. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put on my landing information from MacJeb's, information panel. We're going to go ahead and do our second set of science experiments because we are now in low space above the Mun. And a good chunk of them, we're not going to get the total amount of science for it, but that's, a price we have to pay for a probe start, We could try, bringing this probe back and, recovering all the stuff, but that's not what this mission is about. This mission is about daring exploration, and that means that we are going to land this sucker. And if it's a one-way journey, then so be it. So we're going to go ahead and aim here. This was another thing that I found in my testing, which is why we left at the time that we did, is I want to land in this large crater, and I'm going to aim for the little valley on the southeastern side of it, because if I can land somewhere near that valley, then I can get multiple biomes. I can get the crater biome, I can get the valley biome, I can get the lowlands, the midlands, and the highlands. Now we only have, a few experiments on here that can be repeatable, but if I can get all that science, that'll be amazing. So we get ourselves positioned, then we're going to go ahead and time warp our way and just bask in the glory of parallax. We have collisions turned on, so the rocks that we see, the rocks that will be in our way during landing will affect us. If we land with one of our landing legs on a rock, it's not just going to phase through it and land perfectly, it will tip the craft over. So those are things that we need to take into consideration. It's definitely going to be something that we're going to need to take into consideration once we start doing rovers, because you can't just go flying at 10 meters per second down a hill into a rocky field and expect to be okay. And as the time warp comes to a slow, we know that we have 3 minutes remaining until our burn, so we're going to go ahead and time warp again, speed right back up. I have faith that remote tech will bring us out of time warp when appropriate and fire when necessary. But apparently not that much faith. But it will. Remote tech's flight computer is actually pretty good. Where it's going to become super necessary is once we start getting farther away. Remote tech has signal delay built into it, and it doesn't really matter right now because we are, we're close to Kerbin, so our signal delay is a matter of 0.0 something seconds. You can see in the top left hand. That green number at the bottom on the remote tech, that tells you how much of a delay it takes from the moment you send the command to the moment the probe can activate the command. And that's any command. That is starting the engine, that is running science experiments, that's even just turning. If we are at Duna, and, we have, I don't know what the signal delay for Duna is, but let's just say it's 5 seconds. That means that when we want to turn our craft to point retrograde, we're going to press the keyboard, and then 5 seconds later, that's when it happens. So it's going to make things definitely challenging, and doing things like this with probes is it's going to be a feat. But I'm looking forward to it, and that's what KXP is all about, the exploration. And the crater slowly approaches. We're going quite fast, as you can see. And we still have our transfer stage. I was not expecting to still carry that. One of the things is that I wasn't able to show you because it was part of the lost footage of the creation of this rocket, but our actual landing stage only is, the tank is only half full, because we only gave it enough delta V to go from orbit to landing, so it was going to take care of the deorbit burn itself. But since our transfer stage was still available, we used that to do our deorbit. So now I'm going to zoom in on the landing info, and that's going to show you our time to impact and our suicide burn countdown. Those are the two things to pay attention to with this. But yeah, so we're going to use up some of our fuel. We could use up all of our fuel to do our landing of that lower stage, but I kind of don't want it. We don't have landing gear on it. It wasn't part of the simulation. It wasn't part of the plan, so we're only going to use some of the Delta V. We burned early. Our suicide burn countdown still had about half a minute, but I'm going to burn early. Get rid of some of our fuel, get rid of some of our speed. We're going to scroll down our toolbar, and we're going to open up the trajectories mod, and that's going to give us an idea of where we're landing. Alright, so as we can see, we're going to actually head into that crater over there, so I think I would like to land in that crater. So I'm going to stop our burn for now. We're going to jettison that lower stage. I kicked on my engine because I was expecting it to explode, but I remembered that I didn't actually put any explosives on that stage, so. Alright, so we got about 13 seconds to our suicide burn. 24 seconds to impact. I extend my landing gear, it turns on the lights. I point on trajectories for a second, and then the suicide burn countdown jumped away, and then right at 0 I hit the throttle, but it doesn't kick on. It doesn't kick on for a full minute and 9 seconds. 1.9 seconds. 1.9 seconds. Regardless of how we were late. And they call it a suicide burn because if you don't do it right, good night. But not all is lost, because our probe core and some of our experiments, all of our experiments, and our satellite dishes managed to survive. Look at that. We even got our flags. We officially have planted a flag on the Mun. Sure, it wasn't a graceful landing. Sure, we don't have any solar panels left. This probe is basically dead, and we also broke our Communitron 16, so we don't have any signal to the KSC either. But we survived. We successfully landed on the Mun and lived to tell this tale. Don't have any power, so I'm going to try to see if I can just use the Science Here and Now mod to just kind of cheat my way into getting some science, but thankfully it didn't allow me because no connection. So let's go ahead and check our contracts. We got the testing contract, of course, but explore the Mun, start exploring the Mun, and land on the Mun, all satisfied. So we are moving forward. We are making progress, and we are earning our stripes in the name of exploration. So we're going to say goodbye to the Mun for now, but we'll be back soon. And maybe Jebediah will plant some boots on the surface. But that'll have to be for the next episode. We're going to spend our 163.9 science, and we're going to immediately go into fuel systems because that gives us access to the fuel lines, and that means that we can start doing some asparagus staging, which will make our whole journey much more efficient. We're also going to go into the flight control because it gives us access to the reaction wheel, as well as the Probodobodyne Octo, and even the rover, the RoveMate, so that is going to be a huge thing. I'm tempted to spend our points. We can afford the simple command module, but I think we're going to forgo the Russian-style command modules and just wait to unlock the Mach 1 capsule and go that route. But yeah, that was a pretty good episode. I was pretty happy with how that went. I didn't have to quick load or quick save or quick load or anything like that. As you see, I kind of left everything unedited, so that was exactly what it took to get there. And yeah, I was pretty happy with that. And I hope you liked it. I hope you thought that was good. Even if you've seen my channel before and seen all the moon landings we've done, You know, I like to think that each one has a little special flair to itself, and I hope you enjoyed it. But as the sun dawns on the KSC once again, we are going to turn our sights to new adventures and push our boundaries even further. We're going to be making a lot of progress in this episode, or in this series, and I hope you're ready for it. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.